Your position has been eliminated due to financial optimization measures. My name is Martin Sullivan. At 58 years old, I had devoted 22 years as a senior captain for Meridian Airlines, based out of Denver International. 22 years of spotless safety records. 22 years of precise departures. 22 years of mentoring the rising generation of pilots who would carry our airline's legacy forward. Diane Mercer, our recently appointed operations director, delivered the news while fixated on her tablet screen, avoiding my gaze. Her manicured fingernails tapped rhythmically against a digital spreadsheet that apparently calculated my value to the corporation. Your compensation structure is no longer compatible with our efficiency model, she continued, finally looking up. The severance details are contained in this packet. I accepted the blue folder without opening it. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her, I glimpsed one of our Airbus A320s gliding toward the runway, morning sunlight cascading across its fuselage. Flight 447 to Minneapolis. Ryan Keller would be commanding today. I had endorsed his captain certification just 4 years ago. Is there anything else? I asked, maintaining my composure. Diane shook her head, already shifting her attention back to her tablet. Human Resources will process your exit procedures. They're waiting for you on level 2. I rose, instinctively straightened my uniform jacket, and walked toward the exit. 22 years dissolved in a 4-minute meeting. No questions about who would inherit my training responsibilities. No concern for the 8 flight instructors under my supervision. No acknowledgement of the respect I had cultivated throughout the crew. Captain Sullivan, Diane called as I reached for the door handle. We'll need your uniform returned before you exit the premises. I nodded without turning around and stepped into the hallway where Marcus from HR was already waiting, clipboard poised, his expression clinically neutral as we descended to the processing level. My phone vibrated. A message from Sarah Chun, one of my first officers. Is it true? The rumor about layoffs? I pocketed the phone without responding and followed Marcus to the processing room, where I would surrender my credentials, keys, and the uniform I had worn with dignity for more than 2 decades. In the changing area, I switched to civilian clothes and folded my uniform with military precision, a habit from my naval aviation days that had never faded. As I placed my captain's hat atop the stack, I noticed a small photograph secured inside my locker door. My inaugural crew at Meridian, standing proudly before our aircraft. Most of them now commanded their own flights. They were unaware their mentor had just been grounded. I began flying when I was 20, scraping together tuition for lessons by working overnight shifts at an airport cargo facility. By 26, I had my commercial license and was piloting freight routes throughout the Northwest. The Navy followed, 13 years of service that took me from training squadrons to carrier operations. When I joined Meridian Airlines at 36, I brought that discipline and expertise with me. In those early days, Meridian was expanding rapidly, hungry for seasoned pilots to grow their routes. Eleanor Blackwell, the founder, had personally recruited me. I need you to build me the finest flight team in the business, she had said. And for 22 years, that's precisely what I accomplished. I trained them all, young pilots fresh from aviation academies, military transfers adapting to commercial operations. Every captain who earned their 4th stripe in the past decade had spent time with me in the simulator, enduring emergency scenarios and challenging approach patterns. We created something extraordinary, a reputation for excellence and safety that made Meridian the preferred carrier for corporate travelers and vacationing families alike. Then Eleanor retired 4 years ago. Her son Michael assumed the CEO position, bringing in consultants and efficiency specialists who understood balance sheets better than they understood aviation. The initial changes were subtle: reduced training hours, tighter turnaround schedules, fewer reserve crews. Small compromises that improved financial metrics but strained operational personnel. Diane Mercer arrived 8 months ago to streamline flight operations. She had never piloted anything more sophisticated than a private drone, but she possessed an MBA and a mandate to reduce expenses. The warning signs multiplied. Veteran staff began disappearing, replaced by contract pilots working at reduced rates. Training allocations were slashed. When I voiced concerns about safety margins during a leadership meeting last month, Diane had offered a thin smile and said we were harmonizing resource distribution with industry benchmarks. My phone vibrated again as I exited the office. A message from Julian Reeves, our lead flight instructor. Emergency meeting in the pilot's lounge. Now, I should have proceeded directly home, should have accepted the severance and departed cleanly. Instead, I found myself taking the elevator back to the 4th floor. 10 pilots had gathered in the lounge when I arrived. Sarah Chun, Julian Reeves, and 8 others, all captains I had trained, all wearing identical expressions of barely contained outrage. "Is it true?" Sarah asked again. I nodded once. Effective immediately, the room fell absolutely silent. They claimed it was a restructuring decision. I explained, maintaining neutrality. Nothing personal, purely business. Julian scoffed. Nothing personal? You've been here since before half the executive team earned their degrees. What are your plans? Asked Marcus Rivera, a senior captain who had served as my first officer for 6 years before earning his promotion. I shrugged. Take some downtime. Consider my options. The words sounded hollow, even to myself. This isn't right, Sarah said. She was pacing now, moving between the panoramic windows overlooking the tarmac. You're the cornerstone of the training program. Half the pilots in this company wouldn't have their wings without you. The decision is finalized, I replied. There's no purpose in contesting it. I appreciate your support, but you all have flights to manage. Julian crossed his arms. My next flight isn't scheduled until tomorrow, and I'm contemplating calling in sick. The others murmured agreement, but I shook my head. Don't jeopardize your careers. That's not what I want. As I turned to leave, my phone rang. The display showed Eleanor Blackwell's name. I stepped into the corridor to answer. Martin, I just heard. Eleanor's voice was tight with indignation. Michael told me it was a mutual agreement, that you were prepared for retirement. Not exactly, I said, observing through the glass as the pilots continued their heated discussion in the lounge. This is not how I built this airline, Eleanor said firmly. Not how we treat our people, especially not someone who's given everything to Meridian. It's not your company anymore, Eleanor. A prolonged silence followed. No, it's not. But I maintain connections throughout this industry. Alexandra Vega at Zenith Charter has been searching for someone to revitalize their training division. Interested, Zenith Charter was a swiftly growing premium airline focusing on executive and luxury travel. They had cultivated a stellar reputation and substantial financial backing. I might be, I admitted, but I literally just walked out the door. I need some space. Take the weekend, Eleanor said. I'll arrange a meeting for Monday morning. As our call concluded, I noticed Diane Mercer striding purposefully toward the pilot's lounge, her expression flushed with irritation. Through the glass, I could see more pilots had joined the original group, at least 18 now, all in uniform, all looking resolute. Something shifted within me. For 22 years, I had given everything to Meridian Airlines. Perfect attendance, holiday flights, middle-of-night emergency replacements when others called in sick. I had constructed their training program from scratch, developed safety protocols that became industry standards, and personally mentored dozens of pilots. And they had discarded me with a 4-minute meeting and a blue folder. I re-entered the lounge just as Diane pushed through the opposite entrance. Don't you all have flights to prepare for? She demanded. Nobody moved. 20 pairs of eyes turned to me instead, waiting. I made a decision. Actually, I said quietly, I believe we need to address critical crew safety concerns. Diane's expression hardened. Captain Sullivan is no longer employed by Meridian Airlines. Any safety concerns should follow proper channels. You mean through you? Julian asked, his voice carrying that dangerous calm I recognized from challenging flights. The same person who reduced our simulator training by 35% last quarter? Diane adjusted her blazer. Those modifications were implemented based on efficiency analytics and competitive benchmarks. Those modifications endangered aircraft, Marcus interrupted. And now you're terminating the one person who's been offsetting your cuts by investing extra hours with newer pilots. I raised a hand before the situation escalated further. This isn't about me. It's about protocol and adequate training. The pilots have legitimate concerns, which they can document through appropriate channels. Proper channels, Diane repeated, glancing at her smartwatch. Right now, they have schedules to maintain. Flight 609 to Seattle boards in 35 minutes. Flight 318 to Dallas in 55. No one moved. That's my Seattle flight, Sarah said. And I'm not comfortable departing without addressing these safety matters first. A muscle twitched in Diane's jaw. You're contractually obligated to operate your assigned routes unless there's a verifiable safety concern. Federal aviation regulations are quite explicit on that point, I countered. Diane's eyes narrowed. Is this your strategy, Sullivan? Disrupting operations on your way out? I'm simply supporting valid concerns raised by your pilots, I replied evenly. As a certified flight instructor, I maintain that professional obligation, regardless of my employment status. The standoff continued another tense moment before Diane retrieved her phone. I'm calling Michael. While she stepped aside to make the call, the pilots moved closer to me. What's the strategy here, Martin? Julian asked quietly. No strategy, I replied honestly. Just ensuring your concerns are acknowledged. But something was coalescing in that room. A collective resistance I hadn't anticipated. More pilots were arriving, alerted by messages circulating through the crew. The lounge was growing crowded. Diane returned, looking triumphant. Michael is on his way down. Meanwhile, all pilots are instructed to prepare for their scheduled departures immediately. Or what? Asked Victoria Lawson, a veteran captain who had transferred from Pacific Airways around the same time I joined Meridian. Or you'll face disciplinary action, Diane snapped. Possibly termination. Victoria laughed, the sound cutting sharply through the tense atmosphere. I have 29 years of impeccable flight records and 16 years at this airline. You want to explain to the board why you're dismissing senior captains during peak holiday season? The elevator doors parted, and Michael Blackwell entered in his designer suit, starkly contrasting with the pilots' uniforms. At 38, he resembled a younger, less seasoned version of his mother, but lacked Eleanor's warmth and aviation knowledge. What's happening here? He demanded, scanning the room. Your pilots have safety concerns, I said before Diane could speak. Concerns that have been systematically disregarded for months. Michael's expression tightened. Martin, you're no longer employed here. This doesn't involve you. It involves anyone who values aviation safety, I replied, and anyone who might travel on one of your aircraft. He turned to address the pilots directly. I understand there may be some attachment to Captain Sullivan, but this is a business decision, nothing more. His gaze swept the room. Now I need everyone to resume their duties immediately. No one moved. This is insubordination, Michael warned. Julian stepped forward. No, sir. This is a formal safety stand-down initiated by concerned flight crew members as permitted under federal aviation regulations and our union agreement. Michael's face flushed. Fine. You have 1 hour to submit your concerns in writing to Diane. Then everyone returns to their scheduled flights. As he turned to leave, he paused beside me. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. I could have made this transition comfortable for you. This isn't about me, I repeated. But we both recognized that wasn't entirely accurate. The pilots gathered in the briefing room, swiftly drafting a comprehensive catalog of safety concerns. It wasn't difficult. They had been accumulating for months. Reduced training hours, shortened turnaround times that left inadequate room for proper pre-flight inspections, maintenance issues that were documented but deferred, pressure to reduce fuel loads to minimize costs. I sat quietly at the back, offering occasional guidance, but primarily observing the organic coordination of a crew I had trained. They were professional, methodical, and thorough, everything I had taught them to be. While they worked, I stepped out to call Alexandra Vega. Her voice was precise, authoritative. Ms. Vega, this is Martin Sullivan. Eleanor Blackwell suggested I contact you. Captain Sullivan, Alexandra replied, her tone warming. Eleanor spoke extremely highly of you. I understand Meridian has made a significant miscalculation. That's one interpretation. I have a proposition for you, Alexandra continued. But first, tell me what's transpiring there right now. Eleanor mentioned pilot unrest. I explained the situation briefly. Fascinating. Alexandra said when I finished. And predictable. Listen, I need to make some calls. Can you meet tomorrow instead of Monday? I can meet whenever suits you. Excellent. Meanwhile, don't sign anything from Meridian. No severance agreements, no non-compete clauses. Nothing. Understood. Understood. When I returned to the briefing room, the atmosphere had transformed. The pilots were clustered around Julian's laptop, expressions grim. What is it? I asked. Marcus motioned me over. We were compiling documentation to support our safety claims. Julian discovered something in the system. Julian rotated the screen for my inspection. It displayed a series of maintenance logs for aircraft in the Meridian fleet, logs with discrepancies between initial submissions and final versions. These were altered, he explained. Maintenance issues downgraded from critical to advisory. Required service intervals extended beyond manufacturer specifications. I scrolled through the documents, my concern mounting with each page. How long has this been occurring? Based on accessible records? About 5 months, Julian replied. Right after the new maintenance management software was implemented. The software Diane had insisted would optimize operations. This exceeds cost-cutting, Sarah added. This is dangerous, potentially criminal. We need to include this in the report, I said. Julian nodded. Already incorporated. But Martin, this isn't merely about safety anymore. This is fraud. These records are submitted to the FAA. The door swung open as Michael entered with Diane and 2 men I didn't recognize. Your hour is expired, Michael announced. Diane will review your concerns and address them appropriately. Meanwhile, these gentlemen are from corporate security. They'll escort Captain Sullivan from the premises. Julian closed his laptop and stood. We're not finished. Yes, you are, Michael replied coldly. All pilots are to report to their scheduled flights immediately or face termination for job abandonment. Did you know about the maintenance reports? I asked him directly. Michael's expression remained unchanged, but something flickered in his eyes. I don't know what you're referring to. The falsified maintenance records. The ones being submitted to the FAA with critical issues downgraded. Diane stepped forward quickly. That's an extremely serious accusation. One without evidence and entirely unrelated to the agreed discussion. We have the evidence, Julian said. Both versions of the reports. Michael and Diane exchanged a glance that confirmed everything. This meeting is concluded, Michael declared. Security will remain until all pilots have departed for their assigned duties. As the security officers moved toward me, I watched Sarah discreetly slip Julian's laptop into her flight bag. Whatever happened next, the evidence was secured, and I suddenly understood this wasn't merely about my termination. It was about silencing anyone who might uncover what they had been doing. The security team escorted me to my vehicle in the employee parking structure. As we walked, my phone vibrated with a message from Alexandra Vega. Meeting confirmed 9 a.m. tomorrow, Zenith Charter Headquarters. Once alone in my car, I called Eleanor Blackwell. It's worse than we suspected, I told her. They've been falsifying maintenance records. Eleanor's sharp intake of breath conveyed everything. That explains the sudden profit margin improvements Michael's been boasting about. The pilots have evidence, but Michael's threatening termination if they don't fly. Where are you now? Parking structure. They just escorted me out. Good. Stay away from the terminal. I'll make some calls. I drove to my solitary home. Divorced 5 years ago, daughter completing graduate studies on the West Coast, and waited. Within an hour, my phone began illuminating with messages. Sarah, Flight 609 to Seattle. Canceled, mechanical issues. Julian, 318 to Dallas. Grounded, crew unavailable. Marcus, Denver route canceled. Similar reports cascaded in. One by one, Meridian pilots were discovering reasons not to fly. Not an organized strike. That would be illegal without proper union procedures, but individual decisions based on professional judgment and safety concerns. By evening, the Meridian website displayed dozens of cancellations. I received a call from an unfamiliar number. Captain Sullivan, this is Patricia Hernandez, FAA Safety Inspector. I understand you may possess information regarding falsified maintenance records at Meridian Airlines. I do, but I'm not the primary source. You should speak with Julian Reeves, their lead flight instructor. We're addressing that, Inspector Hernandez replied. Meanwhile, would you be willing to provide a statement? Absolutely. The following morning, I arrived at Zenith Charter's headquarters 15 minutes early. The contemporary building gleamed in the morning light, the company's distinctive silver and teal emblem prominently displayed. Alexandra Vega greeted me in the lobby herself, unusual for the CEO of a growing airline. She was approximately my age, with a firm handshake and direct gaze. Thank you for coming, Captain, she said, guiding me toward the elevator. We have substantial matters to discuss in the conference suite upstairs. She proceeded directly to the point. Meridian Airlines is in serious trouble, Alexandra began. The FAA launched an investigation last night. Their stock is already declining on the news. I'm not surprised. What might surprise you is that we've been monitoring Meridian for some time. Their cost-cutting measures created an opportunity for us. We've been planning to expand our pilot roster to compete more directly with them on premium routes. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was an employment contract with compensation significantly higher than my Meridian package. We want you to lead our flight operations and training division, Alexandra continued. Complete autonomy. Construct it your way, with safety as the absolute priority. I reviewed the contract, noting the title, Director of Flight Operations. There's more, Alexandra added. We're prepared to offer positions to any qualified Meridian pilots who wish to transition immediately. How many positions? How many pilots do you trust? I considered the faces in yesterday's gathering, the professionals I had trained and mentored for years. At least 35, I replied. Experienced, safety-focused captains and first officers. Alexandra smiled. Perfect. That's precisely what we need to execute our expansion. My phone vibrated with a message from Julian, FAA investigators at headquarters. All flights grounded pending inspection. I showed Alexandra the message. Timing is everything in business, she said. Sometimes you must wait for the perfect moment to make your move. Like when your competitor dismisses their most connected pilot and alienates their entire flight crew in one catastrophic day of miscalculations. I accept, I said, extending my hand. The vision was forming, not one of retribution, but of rebuilding something superior. For weeks after my termination, I stood in Zenith Charter's newly expanded training center. The cutting-edge facility featured 8 flight simulators, advanced emergency training equipment, and classrooms equipped with the latest aviation technology. Alexandra had fulfilled her promise of autonomy, approving my design specifications without hesitation. What's your assessment? Alexandra asked, surveying the space. It exceeds my expectations, I replied. She checked her watch. They should be arriving momentarily. On cue, the main entrance opened. Julian Reeves entered first, followed by Sarah, Marcus, and 32 other Meridian pilots, all in civilian attire, all carrying their personal flight bags. Welcome to Zenith, I said simply. Julian grinned. Impressive setup you've established, Captain. As the pilots explored the facility, Alexandra drew me aside. 35 pilots in one day. That's quite a statement. They're the finest in the industry. My phone rang, Eleanor Blackwell calling. Are you watching the financial news? She asked without preamble. No. Why? Turn it on. Any business channel. I nodded to Alexandra, who activated the large display in the briefing room. The business news showed Meridian Airlines stock in freefall, down 52% since the FAA investigation commenced. The ticker indicated trading had been temporarily suspended. Michael just resigned, Eleanor said in my ear. Board forced him out after the preliminary FAA findings. Diane's gone too, effective immediately. The news anchor was saying. Industry sources confirmed that Meridian Airlines has canceled over 380 flights in the past 4 weeks due to pilot shortages and aircraft groundings. The company has been forced to lease aircraft and crews from competitors at premium rates to maintain their core routes. Alexandra turned to the assembled pilots. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future of premium aviation. I thought of Diane Mercer's dismissive words. Your compensation structure is no longer compatible with our efficiency model. She had been correct, in a way. I was worth far more than Meridian had been paying me, a fact now precisely quantified by the market value of 35 experienced pilots and 380 canceled flights. Sometimes the most powerful response isn't what you say, but what you build after you depart. 7 months later, I stood on the observation deck watching Zenith's newest aircraft, a sleek Airbus A350, make its final approach. The plane touched down flawlessly, reverse thrusters engaging at exactly the optimal moment. A perfect landing, as I'd expect from Sarah Chun. Zenith Charter had expanded rapidly, adding 19 new routes and capturing a substantial portion of the premium market formerly dominated by Meridian. Their training program, my training program, was already being recognized as the industry benchmark for safety and excellence. Eleanor Blackwell joined me on the observation platform, watching as the aircraft taxied toward the terminal. Meridian's board offered me the CEO position yesterday, she mentioned casually. Asked me to return and repair the damage. Are you going to accept? Eleanor shook her head. That chapter's closed. Besides, I'm enjoying retirement. The A350 halted at the gate. In moments, Sarah and her crew would disembark, having completed another successful international flight. They're sending a representative to speak with you, Eleanor continued. New board chairperson. They want you back, Martin. Desperately. I wasn't surprised. Meridian had managed to remain operational, but their reputation had suffered. Rebuilding would require experienced leadership they no longer possessed. What will you tell them? Eleanor asked. Below, Sarah emerged from the terminal, spotted me on the deck, and waved. I'll tell them I'm exactly where I belong. We watched as the ground crew prepared the A350 for its next journey. Tomorrow I would be in the captain's seat again, piloting a charter flight to London, not because Zenith required me in the cockpit, but because I had negotiated the right to fly regularly as part of my executive responsibilities. Some things you don't relinquish, regardless of your title. You've built something remarkable here, Eleanor said. We built it. I corrected her, thinking of all the pilots who had taken a chance on following me. The afternoon sun reflected off the aircraft's wings, much like that morning when I had watched Flight 447 taxiing from Diane Mercer's office. The difference was, now I stood precisely where I was meant to be. Not grounded, just flying a better route.